If Roland, who once faced down a 900 gin bull with nothing but a knife, is the archetypal fearless, all-out attacker of Season 7, Cress, who opens Season 8 by dropping a black-tailed deer with a single arrow, is the benchmark for standard survival strategy. Their dazzling runs in the competition feel like a movie-level duel between two heroes, effortlessly fusing brute, warrior-style nerve with calm, calculated strategy in this high-latitude survival contest. Given the choice, would you tag along with Roland for a charcoal grilled steak, or side with Cress for a reindeer feast? Next, standing in a professional survival instructor's shoes, I'll unpack how Cress pulled off one of the show's most effortless solo wins, including practical field techniques that ordinary people can directly learn from. Meanwhile, we'll also weigh how British Columbia's altitude and terrain shape everything, and the threat level of the region's fierce wildlife, to help re-understand the 8th season, strictest in history, with the most survival constraints. And, through the lens of extreme survival skills, grasp why Cress could win. You'll realize wilderness survival isn't about who can suffer more, but about who can think better, use resources more intelligently, and exercise greater self-control. Serious reminder for those lacking survival experience. Don't copy this. The moment Cress reaches the challenge zone, he grabs his 60-pound bow and starts scouting the area, simultaneously screening for an ideal camp location and starting his food search. He quickly spots a wild porcini mushroom on the ground. This rare, natural delicacy can supply trace elements like manganese and zinc that are hard to get in the wild. Cress is very clear that his size and strength can't match big predators in a straight fight, so he refuses to overlook any safe, edible natural resource, stashing them as emergency rations. In just a short time, he's filled an entire bag, enough to see him through those brutal first days. Cress is a wildlife biologist with over a decade in the field, a walking wilderness survival encyclopedia in his own right. On top of that, his archery skills are master level, and core survival skills like shelter building and fishing are just basic operations for him. After gathering the porcini, Cress keeps moving. British Columbia in Canada is one of the regions in the world with the highest density of grouse populations. Grouse are mild-tempered and non-aggressive. Faced with prey that poses no threat at all, they are the best protein source contestants can get. If your marksmanship is sharp, or you lay enough traps, you can ride this food source all the way into the finals. And almost as if on cue, a grouse with almost no sense of wild vigilance walks right into Cress's hunting range. Cress doesn't pause. He draws and looses in one fluid motion. To Cress, the grouse here are like NPCs in a video game world. All he has to do is lift his hand, and he can take them easily. Perfect to pair with the porcini he just collected, and whip up a balanced chicken and mushroom stew. Then, Cress moves down to the lakeshore to dress the grouse, fully aware that even a sliver of meat could draw a grizzly straight to his camp. Remember, their olfactory cells number around 21 million, while we've only got about 5 million, and their noses work some 2,000 to 3,000 times better than ours. They can easily pick up food scents from 5 kilometers away, so any leftovers must be dealt with promptly and properly. But just as he sets the iron pot down and turns his head,
What was that?
he sees, barely more than 20 meters away, a cougar staring straight at him. Adult cougars are uniformly tawny brown over the whole body. Their heads are round, with a short snout, and the fur around their neck often has black markings. Cougars are classic ambush apex predators, preying mainly on deer. They use terrain to conceal themselves, then use the explosive power of their hind legs to leap forward in a charge, using front paws to smash prey, then clamping the neck to kill. The entire kill takes only 2 to 3 seconds, and its success rate can reach as high as 70%. Facing this apex predator, Cress doesn't flinch. He actually rushes straight at the cougar. Seeing this two-legged King Kong looming over it, the cougar spins and sprints off without a glance, its appetite gone, its craving for fresh meat instantly gone. The real one left sulking was Cress, staring as a month's worth of protein vanished before him. Cress wanted to spook the cougar into climbing a tree. That would have given him a better shot than if it bolted. A cougar explodes to 60 to 80 kilometers an hour, leaving Usain Bolt hopeless. Over a short dash, absolutely leaves Bolt in the dust. Cress really wanted to line up a shot with his bow, but it just wasn't in his hands right then. If he'd turned to grab it, he'd likely end up kiting the cougar. So Cress instead bet on the chance it might bolt up a tree. In the end, he had to drop that plan and just settle for his hard-won chicken and mushroom stew. By the afternoon of the 5th day, Colin's stash of chicken and mushroom stew was long gone. Even the pot bottom was scraped clean. So with a food crisis looming, he figured it was time to fire up his fishing plan. The Chilco River is the 3rd largest sockeye salmon run in British Columbia. So August to September is right when the salmon run peaks. And coincidentally, their start date is September 18th. That's already the tail end of this seasonal bonus. Chilko Lake still held plenty of rainbow trout to be had. They've long been the go-to meal for the area's grizzlies, wolves, cougars, and other predators, which means that while fishing, Contestants must constantly stay alert to the threat of apex predators. Beyond deadly risk from apex predators, Canada enforces strict rules to protect the ecosystem, with local authorities setting harsh rules for contestants. They are allowed to take only 2 fish per day. Any rainbow trout over 70 centimeters must be released, which means they have to check their lines at least once every 2 days. Otherwise, they'll quickly slide into constant hunger. To snag that first bite of fresh fish in the morning, Chris has his line in after 7 a.m. Chilko Lake is a high-altitude lake at 1,170 meters, and even in September's warmth, the day-night temperature swing can top 20 degrees. Fishing at dawn lets him conserve strength while dodging midday heat and the cold of night. Meanwhile, working out here costs about 30% more effort than on the plains. In the middle of his commentary, a fish voluntarily takes the bait, and a rainbow trout of about 40 centimeters is hauled ashore. It's not much of a heavy weight, but it's enough to keep him from going hungry, and it gives him a solid boost of vitamins. It's also the first proper fish he's pulled in with his homemade rod, giving him a steadier hope for the tough days ahead. Theresa reaches this unfamiliar place, unusually excited, and first strolls along the lakeshore, looking for a suitable campsite when a patch of bright red berries suddenly catches her eye. Faced with nature's gift, Theresa doesn't stand on ceremony, since eating her fill is what matters most out here. After that, she decides to set up camp about 20 meters from this berry patch, right by the water, so she can grab plants and fetch water without any hassle. Theresa, speaking with a crisp British accent, is a PhD who studies prehistoric animals and a Stone Age tech expert who spends her downtime napping stone blades. Whether it's hunting skills, cooking good food, or building shelters, he can handle it all on his own, but the pressure of life in the UK is just as heavy. So Theresa hopes to win the prize money and escape the financial kill line. She relaxes by Chilko Lake, boiling a pot of clean water for the night, gazing at the lakeside sunset, and for a moment, letting herself drift into nature's calm. After a short mental reset, she snaps back to the core work of staying alive. Chilko Lake is high, with day-night temperatures swinging over 20 degrees Celsius. So Theresa opts for a well-insulated pit house shelter, even though it takes much more effort than a basic A-frame lean-to. By late October, as long as she keeps a campfire burning inside, it can block out the high-altitude cold and help deter grizzlies from raiding in the middle of the night. Pit house building methods go back more than 1,000 years, with comparable dwellings unearthed at sites in Japan, Iceland, and elsewhere. Even today, some groups still use this traditional building method. As she digs, Theresa carefully hunts for the high-protein larvae in the soil, munching them as a bonus meal, and even sharing a quick verdict afterward. They're not abundant, but gram for gram they pack several times the protein of beef. Half a day of digging, and the 2x2 meter, 1 meter deep pit shelter is basically taking shape. Seeing the light fading, the rest of the work will have to wait until tomorrow. But that very night, a grizzly passes by Theresa's camp, sending a chill down her spine so she can only clutch her bear spray tightly, never falling into a deep sleep. The spot she chose for her shelter sits smack on the grizzly's regular path. This season, the lake teems with fish, and the bears are long used to foraging along the bays, while Theresa chose this location precisely for easy access to water and fishing. Knowing grizzlies will keep cruising past her camp, she makes beefing up the shelter her #1 job for the day. To make it easier to get in and out, she builds a simple stairway on the inland side and leaves a reserved space for a fireplace. Then she digs a deeper hole in the center to set a load-bearing post. And next, Theresa spots a sturdy driftwood log on the lakeshore, carries it back to camp in her bare hands, and lowers it into the pit. She stuffs sand and stones into the gaps, ramming them tight so the main post is solid and won't budge. Next, she arranges timbers one by one around the central post so that the load is evenly distributed, so the whole thing doesn't get blown apart by one grizzly swipe. With the frame done, the next step is to refine the shelter's details and put proper insulation and protection in place. When Jordan appears, he pushes aside a log and eats ants raw. 100 grams of ants actually provide more protein than an egg, but they taste nothing like an egg, with a sour, lemon-like tang in the mouth. After a simple meal, he turns first to building a permanent shelter, finding a relatively open and level spot in the dense forest. This location can get the maximum possible sunlight while still keeping a wide field of view, so he can spot any threat around him sooner. Jordan's going to put up a 2x3 meter log cabin, using logs all roughly 20 centimeters in diameter. At every corner, he chops angled grooves, locking the upright and cross logs to hold them. In the cold, the wood will shrink, making the whole structure even more solid. And it's tough enough to block nighttime visits from grizzlies and wolverines. Later on, he only needs to pack grass into the gaps between the logs, and the cold of autumn and winter won't be able to get in at all. During construction, Jordan strictly controls the cutting angle of every log and how tightly each joint fits, showing he's a total perfectionist in everyday life. After a full day's work, the cabin's framework is already standing. But a bit past 10 that night, Jordan is suddenly woken by heavy breathing right outside. Checking the monitoring camera, he sees a grizzly right near the camp, and that close encounter with a predator makes cold sweat break out on him in an instant as he struggles to avoid becoming bear food. Dawn the next day, Jordan picks up the pace on his shelter. He'd purposely set up camp well away from. Places like lake shores and berry patches are grizzly hotspots. But honestly, it's often your strange human smell that really pulls a bear in to check you out. The moment Matt steps off the boat onto the island, he's especially excited. Because out in the lake, not far ahead of him, he spots a moose weighing around 900 pounds. In water, their walking speed is only about 8 kilometers per hour. If he drew his bow now, he'd have no trouble hitting one. Too bad that this season, moose are listed as a protected species. Otherwise, with Matt's sharpshooting, he might have clinched the win early. His childhood love for the wild and freedom eventually led Matt to become a wilderness survival instructor. Backed by a full set of survival skills, Matt has already toughed out 7 winters alone in the wild. In this competition, there's no set survival deadline. Just outlast everyone else, and the prize money is yours. He was the first contestant the production team greenlit, and, sure of his survival chops, Matt even skipped packing a Ferro rod when picking his gear, and chose emergency rations instead. He believes once you have a fire, and keep it alive, the fire starter's job is done, whereas emergency food can easily become the key resource that turns the tide. As everyone else second-guessed his choice, Matt was already on the hand drill, calmly grinding out fire. His easy, practiced motions made his experience obvious, and he didn't burn any of those precious first hours on this step. Soon enough, a tiny flame flickered up, taking care of his nighttime safety problem, but also giving him a huge psychological boost. With the fire issue settled, Matt scouted the area. No sooner had he stepped into trees than he came across Grizzly, war leftovers. In a huge forest, if you put up a shelter, you've got to steer clear of grizzly trails and berry patches since they're obsessed with berries. Over a lifetime, they can eat around 200,000 of them. This discovery made Matt reassess just how secure his camp really needed to be. When he reached a particularly dense stand of trees, a clear grizzly roar suddenly came from the brush not far away.
透过树干缝隙，他看清一只带幼崽活动的母灰熊。
Historically, about 70% of recorded grizzly attacks on humans are defensive strikes by mothers protecting their young. So listen up, brothers. Spot grizzly cubs out there, you bail out right away. Don't stick around even a second. Never walk up out of curiosity to take photos. They're not animals that have been tamed by humans. Matt knows exactly where his limits are. After all, staying alive is the #1 iron rule of survival. As the boat skims Chilko Lake's pale green water, the wild unknown ahead, Tim's face is lit up with excitement. At last, he can really prove what he can do. To prove what he's really made of out here. A veteran hunter with decades under his belt, he's dropped more game than he can remember. Even fierce black bears have fallen to his compound bow. Years of outdoor experience mean his first instinct is to explore this unfamiliar land, to scout resources and a naturally protected camp spot. Though this season's rules are strict, the rich wildlife of British Columbia still gives contestants a real shot at survival. This is one of the densest grouse habitats in the world, with well-placed traps.
他要是布好陷阱，蛋白质就稳了。天天换着花样吃，松鸡不重样。正当他正想着今晚松鸡大餐时，地上一串脚印，立马让他脚步暂停。 根据不完全统计
By 2020, the number of grizzlies in the South, Chilco region had already exceeded 200, which basically means he's trying to snatch food right in the bear's own backyard. Plus, it's late in the salmon run, and the grizzly's bulking up for hibernation, weighs 400 kilograms. A paw strike delivers 1,600 to 2,000 newtons of force, easily smashing an adult reindeer's skull or a human's ribs.
飞快回想过灰熊力量后 ，Tim 望向迷雾笼罩的 Chilco 湖
and becomes even more determined to build a solid shelter. So while his strength is still relatively good in these early days, he decides to build a sloped shelter around 3 large trees, stacking logs layer by layer to form the walls, then laying a tarp over the frame once it's up. Working non-stop past 6, he builds a shelter that's sturdy and cozy. Is finally completed. Looking at his handiwork, Tim can't wait to lie inside and try it out. And judging by the relaxed grin on his face, this house is cozier. After burning so much energy, Tim definitely needs a big meal. He spots a grouse in a tree near camp and skips his bow, trying to drop it with a thrown stone. But his aim lets him down, and the grouse manages to take off again. To play off the awkward miss, Tim hurriedly hoists on his pack, pretending to be busy. Though the fact that he's starving is impossible to hide. He's heard that at this time of year, Chilko Lake is full of salmon and trout. So he snaps off his toothbrush's metal handle and files it into a lure. Because this season is the most restrictive in the history of Alone. The fishing rules are strict. Contestants must use single barbless hooks, and they're not even allowed to use live bait. With rules this strict, it's obviously way tougher for them to pull in any food while also putting their real skills to the test, and better filtering out who truly deserves the $500,000 prize. As the sky clears, strong winds whip Chilko Lake's green surface, kicking up ripples. And with nothing to break the wind, gusts over the lake reach speeds of up to 30 kilometers per hour. So the featherlight lure can hardly be cast at all, and nearly hooks him on the rebound. With plump trout right in front of him, yet still out of reach, the repeatedly frustrated Tim starts to grumble, his strength completely spent and nothing to show for it. He had no other options, so he just went back to camp and kept lying flat. Time jumps ahead to day 6, and Tim, who still hasn't had any steady food coming in, his body, just to stay functional, has already started chewing through his fat reserves. His body's already chewing through his fat reserves, and despite 14 hours of sleep the night before, he still woke up in a state of extreme exhaustion. As he dragged his weakened body out to look for food, a grouse suddenly flew out from the trees by the shore. In that moment, he regretted not bringing a bow. Faced with deadly temptation of protein, Tim's instincts drove him into the forest, intending to try once more to knock down the grouse with stones. But just then, a sudden bout of angina hit, and Tim realized his body could no longer hold out. He rushed back to camp, grabbed the satellite phone, and called in his own withdrawal.
Tim, I need help. I'm scared. I'm having severe chest pains. My heart's beating real hard. I think I might be having a heart attack.
Before signing up, Tim already had severe heart disease, and doctors had cautioned him that joining in his state was risky. But to keep his family from falling below the cut line, he took the risk and tried, only to find he was destined not to touch. In the end, Tim, supported by the medical staff, left the competition by helicopter with the prize money slipping away, becoming the first contestant to withdraw. Judging from his survival condition, Tim's exit had long been expected. As a typical representative of an American redneck, he'd already washed out of the 12-hour shifts on an offshore rig. He switched to what he thought was an easier wilderness survival path. By day 6, he still had no food. Rather than pushing to change his situation, he lies in his shelter, revealing how little will to survive he shows. Classic example of wanting rewards without putting in work. Maybe after joining, he realized the rules were strict and then chose to slack off. This season's rules are stricter than last season's. This season, they're banned from hunting grizzlies or moose and can't use gill nets for the first 45 days. On top of that, they can only catch 2 fish a day and must use a single barbless hook approved by the show. These mandatory rules completely tie the hands of contestants who are used to traditional tools and hunting methods. For Tim, instead of sticking around and grinding his body down, it's better to withdraw early and go back home to work. Meanwhile, Bick, crouched down and about to drink rainwater to stave off hunger, adopted a succeed or die trying mindset, deliberately putting on 30 gin before the competition, pushing his weight up to 230 pounds, so that if he couldn't get food, he could rely on his body fat to carry him right up to his physical limit. He hadn't expected that by day 2, he'd already be forced to tap into this secret weapon, because he had spent all of the first day building his shelter. Last night's rainwater became his morning English breakfast tea, not only flavored by fallen forest leaves, but also mixed with a bit of protein, enough to fill his stomach. From the footage, we notice in the lower right corner of the screen that in only one day, he's already put up roughly half the shelter. So Bick can still steal a moment amid the frantic early days to savor Chilko Lake, its malachite-colored waters, and the glorious sunrise pouring over the mountains. Before this majestic landscape, he spreads his arms wide, calling this place his second home. With his heart content, Bick continues to push forward with his daily survival tasks. It's worth noting, he set up his shelter on a bank roughly 4 meters above the lake. While this keeps him safe from fluctuating water levels, it also puts him right on the main path grizzlies use to forage along the shore, which means he'll be bumping into grizzlies all the time as they come and go. Of course, he made this choice primarily for easy access to water and fish, since for someone weighing over 200 pounds, long treks would burn a huge amount of energy. So he stacked extra logs around the shelter's base, hoping they'd stop a grizzly from smashing in at night. While scouting the surrounding area, gathering building materials and natural stone, an iron ingot on driftwood by the shore caught his eye. By the show's rules, contestants can use whatever they pick up on land or in the water. This unexpected discovery sparked a new idea in Bick's mind. Because he hadn't included a knife among his chosen gear, he decided to use this iron ingot to forge a simple handmade blade. After all, this sort of fixation seems carved right into a man's bones. Judging from the temperature of his forge, producing a reliable knife would be quite difficult. Still, it should be enough for basic tasks like cutting and trimming. He declared that after his blade was forged, he would emulate Roland from Season 7, use a small knife to hunt large predators. Next is female contestant Rose entering a battlefield where male contestants often have upper hand. With an impressive record of taking down 29 large North American game animals, she sailed through the show's strict selection process. But in this back-to-basics survival challenge, Rose has no firearms or compound bow to rely on. She can only depend on her many years of experience to secure food and build shelter. So when she reaches Chilko Lake, job number 1 is putting up a shelter tough enough to take a sudden hit from a grizzly. Keep in mind, a single swipe from an adult grizzly can hit with roughly 200 kilos of force, more than enough to shatter a person's ribs. Picking a campsite for a shelter means 3 things: sunlight, clear sightlines, but also having water close at hand. So the clearing in front of her is actually a solid spot. If she set up right on the lakeshore, she'd almost certainly run into grizzlies coming to fish and forage. Because September is salmon season, when grizzlies crowd rivers to gorge on fish and bulk up for hibernation. Early on, the A-frame is the default shelter. Simple for one to put up, sturdy and dependable, and a favorite among many outdoor survival contestants. Naturally, 43-year-old Rose also opts for this design. She starts by gathering dead logs around 8 centimeters thick, just about what she can safely manage. This wood has very low moisture content, so it's less likely to warp or get damp. The inside needn't be big, enough for one person, and some basic supplies. After all, Chilko Lake sits at over 1,000 meters above sea level, and winter nights here can plunge to minus 30 degrees Celsius. A tight, compact shelter holds heat far better, especially if she fails to pack on enough insulating fat. Otherwise, falling asleep could become a problem. After 2.5 hours gathering materials, straight support frames are in place. Then she lays a ridgepole as the crossbeam, and the basic outline of the shelter appears before our eyes. The rest of the walls and small details will have to wait for later. Rose hopes this shelter, built with her own hands, can accompany her all the way to the final victory. Dreams are fine, but waking up means facing the real world. After 2 days of steady work, her shelter is about 80% complete. Yet she still hadn't managed to secure a reliable food source, so she could only gather the easily accessible bearberries near camp to fill her stomach. This berry is also called kinnikinnick and usually grows on a small evergreen shrub, and it's named that because bears especially love eating these red berries. So folks call it bearberry or bearberry plum. When it's ripe, it turns bright red, with a flowery, starchy texture and bland taste. But long use causes liver damage. So after barely dulling her hunger, she returned to work. Rose gathered her gear, planning to move into her new home that very day. Although the temporary shelter was only about 400 meters from the new camp, the move took over 2 hours. After several trips back and forth, she could at last start putting the final touches on her new place, beginning by laying down the tarp to keep out moisture and give the whole shelter a good scrub, inside and out. Seeing the shelter she'd built herself, her mood lifted a lot, and she felt even more hopeful about the unknown days ahead. But once darkness fell, the harsh wilderness hit her with its worst blow yet. Late that night, Rose lay sleepless in her sleeping bag, her stomach churning with discomfort. She figured it was from eating too many berries. Like I said before, eating too many bearberries or for too long can harm the liver, probably because the arbutin breaks down into hydroquinone in the body. Or maybe just the berry's high sugar content caused her stomach pain and bloating. Obviously, Rose still couldn't rein in her appetite, and the stomach pain kept her up all night. Her symptoms dragged on into morning without easing up. Enduring her body's constant discomfort and torment, Rose was torn, unsure whether to chase the prize money or protect her health. The 7th contestant is Nate, a 46-year-old veteran with 24 years of military service, who saw combat in Iraq and Afghanistan, where constant gunfire forged his will into unshakable steel. Even though the surrounding landscape is stunningly beautiful, he has no time to admire it. He hits the ground, drops his pack, and moves with soldier's precision, grips his bow, and walks along the lakeshore to scout the area and look for food. After all, out here in the wild, energy consumption is huge, and protein is key to maintaining strength, especially since he doesn't have much body fat to burn. While exploring the forest, he spots a slim trail that wild animals obviously use all year, which means small animals have been traveling the same route many times. Drawing on his knowledge of the local ecosystem, Nate figures this is probably a grouse trail, because British Columbia in Canada is one of the regions with the highest grouse population density in the world, and in an area almost untouched by people. Wildlife naturally thrives. On top of that, grouse meat is a good source of protein, phosphorus, and vitamin B12. He hasn't gone far before his guess is confirmed by a grouse perched in the treetop ahead. Years in uniform have honed his instincts, so he never lets his target out of sight, never letting it slip away. He then slowly moves into effective bow range, pauses, lifts the bow, and pulls back. Sadly, the arrow dips low, and his dream of chicken stew is gone. Nate shrugs it off and treats it as a lesson. Every failure, after all, lays the groundwork for the next success. He plans to set snare traps, believing that sooner or later there'll be a surprise for him. But trials of fate come one after another. Yesterday, he walked about 2 kilometers.
把那堆牛肝菌好不容易背回营地，正打算拿来垫肚子时，
He discovered that only 2 lonely stems were left. From the crime scene, he figured squirrels had probably swiped and eaten them. Nate joked that once his strength is restored, he's definitely going to stir up a storm in the squirrel world. For now he has to zero in on whatever's easiest to catch, and those plump lake salmon are his top choice. Because of the show's rules, he's not allowed to use live bait, which undoubtedly makes fishing more difficult. But the seasoned Nate still has a way around it. He braids a bit of paracord into a fake lure, then picks out stones of the right size to use as sinkers, so the featherlight hook can sink below the surface. Nate wants fishing to run on autopilot, so he can free himself up to tackle the rest of his daily chores. After all, he can't neglect the food on land, and his proper, decent shelter isn't finished yet. So after securing the fishing line to a stick, he heads off to set some snares for the little squirrels. Michel, the moment he appears, shows us his latest handiwork on camera, a pure, all-natural charcoal roasted cricket as a treat for himself. This thing is actually a top-tier delicacy. Every 100 grams of cricket has about the same calories as 2 Oreo sandwich cookies. Aside from the legs scratching your throat a bit, the rest is packed with protein and energy. The problem is that one cricket isn't enough to be satisfying. Michel lived 4 years with an indigenous tribe in Alaska, which maxed out his cold-resistant stats. And surviving in a frigid climate is the best training for a person's willpower. Plus, nearly half this contest will unfold in the dead of winter. Plus, he's a wilderness survival instructor who knows wild edible plants like the back of his hand, and setting traps or making tools is second nature to him. With winter only a month away, Michel walks along the lakeshore constantly gathering food. Sticking close to the shore means there's more food he can easily get right now. Tracking the signs in animal scat, he soon digs up wild onions hidden deep in the soil. They're not exactly calorie bombs, but out here one of the golden rules is that every scrap of energy counts. And since it's already mid-September, a lot of the plants out here are past their best. The handful of wild onions Michel is holding will only give him about 40 calories. You may have noticed that in this episode, many contestants are picking berries along the shore. That's because after grizzlies eat berries, they poop along their feeding routes by the water, and the undigested seeds sprout and grow in this naturally fertilized soil. So this stretch of shoreline offers not just fish, but enough berries to see the contestants through the whole autumn. But as he's quietly eating by the lake, a nearby scene suddenly breaks Michel's calm. An adolescent grizzly is soaking in the water. Judging by eye, it weighs around 200 gin or so, and at about 3 years old, it's in the stage of foraging on its own, full of curiosity. They often show up around lakes and streams, but this time the grizzly seems to have caught human scent, and it starts slowly swimming in Michel's direction. Terrified, Michel grabs his camera, spins away, and slips into the bushes to hide, carefully avoiding eye contact with the bear. If it turned into a chase, Michel doesn't even dare imagine how bad the outcome could be. A grizzly can hit speeds of up to 50 kilometers per hour over short distances, and it can still barrel along at full tilt over rough mountain ground, body hunched as it runs. Colter, working to start a fire, is the second contestant this season without a Ferro rod, choosing instead to bring an extra tarp. Yet, after an entire morning, this was already his 6th attempt at igniting the wood shavings. You can imagine how difficult this technical skill is, even for someone experienced. What's more, it's already day 4. Today, he gathered some dry branches and planks and switched to the more efficient bow drill method. Using high-speed friction like this is far more effective than rubbing by hand, and the results speak for themselves. Before long, a faint curl of smoke drifts up. As for why he chose to bring an extra tarp, it's because the conditions this season are much harsher. Gill nets must wait until after day 45, and early on, there's a limit to when they can fish. They can only take 2 fish a day. So for now, Colter plans to build a small boat and paddle out to the middle of the lake to fish. After all, the salmon run going on now is his only chance to score a massive haul and pull ahead of the other contestants in terms of resources. If he can pull in 2 fish a day and decides to eat one while stashing the other,
到后期他肯定会成唯一一个囤货最充足的选手。
that's why the role of the tarp he chose over a ferro rod. On paper, the plan was flawless. But Colter had never built a boat and could only boldly copy the single-person canoe in his memory. After a morning of hard work, the rough outline had already taken shape. Seems he's putting together a little dugout canoe. After a day of work, Colter's boat has really changed. We can clearly see that the tarp has now been added to the boat. For him, this dugout canoe carries all his hopes of winning that $500,000 prize. Getting this canoe done and afloat just a day sooner could net him another full day of food, because the salmon run is already slowly coming to an end. Even though he's racing against time, every detail of the boat has to be spot on. Not a single seam in the tarp can be sloppy. Colter's hand-built dugout canoe draws on early traditional canoe craftsmanship with 3 added crossbeams. These hold the hull's shape and spread the load. Together, the cross ribs and lengthwise supports keeps the hull's curve and rigidity, and the flexed wooden slats under tension helps the hull stay relatively stable under load, because falling into that icy lake would be no joke. Growing up in Alaska, Colter has heard every year of countless people falling into freezing lakes and dying from hypothermia, so he's especially cautious about the boat's stability and safety. If he's going to be a proper captain, how could he possibly go without a good, handy paddle? With everything ready, Colter happily pushes the boat into the lake for its first test. A gentle breeze wrinkles the lake today, perfect for testing how the little boat takes a hit. But as soon as he sits, the oncoming waves have the skinny hull swaying side to side. Looks like his experience still isn't quite enough. The boat is simply too narrow. After this first water test, Colter decides to add outriggers on both sides of the hull. That way he can keep the boat stable on the water, and all the time he lost earlier can be easily made up. In earlier seasons, plenty of people also tried their hand at building little boats to fish from, only to see their efforts doomed the moment they hit the water, or end up with results far short of what they'd hoped. Still, we're really hoping to see Colter haul in a massive catch. Before he knows it, it's already day 7 of the competition, and only now does white-bearded Nate start on his shelter. Drawing on military past, he favors simple, efficient solutions in everything. He opts for a simple A-frame shelter, with a clear, no-nonsense plan in mind. He intends to keep the overall height of the shelter at around 1.5 meters. For him, the shelter only needs to be big enough for him to sleep in. A smaller interior also helps retain warmth more effectively. Chopping wood, making a fire, and cooking can all be done right at the entrance. For now, it's only a waterproof tarp on the ground, but later he'll layer on spruce branches and moss for insulation and rain cover, softening the sting of the cold. After a whole morning of work, it's finally time for a hearty meal. Eager with anticipation, Nate goes to check the automatic fishing rig he set up 2 days ago. With the sky clearing and the water so clear, he's convinced there's a big fish on the line. The moment he starts reeling in, he feels a powerful resistance from the other end. Is this the catch he's waited for? As he drags the fish ashore, the knot of tension in Nate's chest at last loosens. A plump bull trout is enough to fuel him for 2 full days. He cleans and dresses the fish right there on the shore, so bears won't catch a scent trail back to camp. Back home, he stews the trout with porcini and berries. When the flames leap to life, the lonely Chilko Lake suddenly takes on a hint of human warmth, and Nate gains some comfort in this wilderness. What makes this show captivating is how it touches the deepest desires today. In a world worn by pace, this is a place where you can completely empty your overworked mind. The solitude awakens the primal wildness buried in human bones. It's a kind of rest adults almost never get. This isn't just a survival game for prize money, but a life journey that heals the self and settles the mind. Having seen how well his automatic fishing setup works, Nate is already plotting a more efficient system. If he can extend his fishing line into deeper waters, he'll likely pull in fish almost daily and still lay by enough to see him through the long winter.